Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL. Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Thursday, April 3rd, the year of our Lord 2025, and this is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Certainly happy that you guys have elected to listen today. Always happy for that. Gamecock softball wins again last night, 2-0 over the Wofford Terriers. I didn't know Wofford was. I think I did know Wofford was in their second season playing softball. It's like softball programs are popping up all over the upstate, right? Because Clemson just started a program too in recent times. Gamecocks win, though. They get ready for Ole Miss this weekend. It never ends in the SEC. Good interview with Ashley Chastain-Woodard on the morning show yesterday. She kind of got into the I guess there was an article in Softball America. I guess there's a Baseball and Softball America. Kind of a cheap shot, kind of accused the Gamecocks of being unethical about, I guess, wearing some different colors, something like that. But she explained it and explained that South Carolina and Oklahoma are certified in this kind of, I don't know if you call it a psychological approach or something like that, but it's kind of a thing. It's legal. There's no cheating going on, so whatever. I think anytime you're an upstart in a sport and you kind of shake it up, we saw this. We see this. We still see it with women's basketball. You can't find a talking head that gives the Gamecocks a chance. I think some reluctantly picked them last year because they were by far the best team in the country, even though Caitlin Clark was clearly the best player, and a lot of the country was pulling for Caitlin Clark. Trust me. I got some poop talk to me in a bar in Illinois full of Iowa fans. It's the only time I've ever, the whole time ever been here, outside of Chicago, that where I live temporarily. Just for those that don't know, definitely not. Once the stepson gets out of school and stuff, the wife and I are going to be back to. I'll be back in God's country. She'll be going there for the first time, but we're here now. And man, I've watched Carolina play Notre Dame at this place, Illinois this past year at this place. Never had anybody like attack the South and basically use the old tired stereotypes that everybody's dumb, all this good stuff. And so I'm sitting there and there's this older guy, older than me, and just was mad because Iowa lost. He wasn't even an Iowa fan, Caitlin Clark fan, and just start talking about the education that's in South Carolina and all this. Most people, and you guys will like this, actually are jealous and wondering why the hell anyone would move from South Carolina up towards Chicago. So that's always been something I was kind of surprised about, and but I faced bias. Regional bias after that, and the women's basketball world was not pulling for Carolina last year. But you see it, they still. And look, I agree that UConn should be the favorite, and a big part of that is the 87-58 whipping they put on Carolina. They're playing very well. They're healthy. They're historically the best program in the country. You don't bet against that, but. Nobody's picking the Gamecocks. Oh, if Texas wins, they'll give it. I mean, I'm like, look, man, look at the results. And I know Carolina has played pretty poorly the last three games. Indiana was more competitive than they would want. Maryland certainly was, and Duke certainly was. So I'm not hiding from that. I'm just saying that when you have a South Carolina since 2017, it's kind of been the team. They've won 3 national championships, undefeated seasons. Anyway. But you see it there. You're going to see it in football. You can see them downplay South Carolina if they get it going. I even felt, to be honest, while the baseball team was rolling, everybody acted like it was like this miracle. And it was very historic, the run they went on in the NCAA tournament. But it was just like, oh my God, what a story and all this stuff. Little old South Carolina. I'm like, this when they played Arizona finally in 2012 and the Wildcats finally knocked them off. It was the sixth time they played for a national championship, which isn't the best ever, but it's a blue blood type of deal. Carolina's got one of the best winning percentages in Omaha of any program on earth, but and did, but I know. Well, that was just a flash in the pan, little old South Carolina. You know, they were right about the Final Four there being a drop off after the Final Four in men's basketball, but I just I don't like to play the disrespect card, but it happens, and so and honestly, when I was covering national recruiting and things like that, working in broader college football, it was there too. But, with my position and, having connections to South Carolina, obviously, after I started thebigspur.com in '07, you have to deal with all fan bases. So I was just very careful about going overboard. And maybe I was guilty of it too. But, results matter. And look, Gamecocks start winning. Uh, Obviously, that changes some narratives. But here's the thing, though. Even when they do start winning, like in women's basketball, it's just like really tough. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is there. I'm sure other schools that aren't synonymous or near big population centers or not your historical good teams are facing that too. But I think that's kind of the root of maybe the softball article is my point, because it's like, well, these what are these gals doing here? They don't belong at the party. Anyway, all that aside, didn't mean to go off on a tangent about that. Obviously, Kobe Knox has committed to the Gamecocks, and I told myself during this transfer portal window, I was going to look at stats because you want shooters. You just have guys that sort of are what they are sometimes. I remember Talon Cooper, when you looked at his assist numbers and then you watched him play, you're like, well, that's a good passer. And so numbers are important. I know Kobe's not, I think 10.8 points and some rebounds are up there for a guard. 3.1 rebounds, 1.6 assists, shot 46% from the field. And from 3-point range this past season, he was 33.1%. Now, in Grand Canyon as a true freshman, 41% from three, 31.7 there. I think, yeah, 31.7% in 2023, 2024. All right, so here's what I like about him. Number one, he's gotten better every single year. He got better this past year at South Florida. For example, free throw shooting was a problem in 24, 57%, 76% this past year. His rebounding went up. He had a game against Wichita State in the American Championship second round where he 15 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a block shot, 4 steals. Big stuffing stat line. South Florida was not very good, but guys, remember their coach died. Passed away. So they went 13-19. You didn't hear much about them. Big losing streak at the end of the year. Played Wichita within 5 in the tournament, but really tough year for the South Florida Bulls. The previous year, they were a bubble team. I remember there was maybe some controversy. I think they got left out. I think they won the American Conference Championship regular season. So he contributed to that team. When you look at Kobe Knox too, the guy is a winner, and has great bloodlines. He's from Tampa originally. His brother Kevin Knox played at Kentucky, was the 9th overall pick by the Knicks. Dad was a receiver at Florida State on the national championship team in 1993. His offensive coordinator was Brad Scott, by the way. We played for the Bills. His mom played at Immokalee High School, volleyball player. And they use the mantra, nobody works harder than the Knoxes. And he is a hard worker. I mean, this guy gets it, right? You're not going to have a situation where he's getting NIL money all of a sudden and he's very selfish and makes bad decisions on the basketball court. I think, the fact that he and his family picked South Carolina is a testament to the coaching staff and the ability to sell the program because Kobe and his parents, I mean, they're not. I mean, Kevin played at Kentucky. He's in the NBA. They're not going to sit there and go to some Mickey Mouse basketball program, right? The odds of that happening are slim, and you kind of look at it. So Grand Canyon, obviously, Bryce Drew is out there, and they've been winning. South Florida under their coach that unfortunately passed away. That was the guy at Kennesaw State, and he ended up going to South Florida, taking that job. And so it's and he unfortunately passed away. Routine surgery is weird. Abdur Rahim was his name, and so that wasn't a surprise because Abdur Rahim was getting it going. Okay, so you got that part of it, and then Amir Abdur Rahim, and so look, man, it's a situation where this guy's aligned himself with winners. And I watched his film, and he's got a good jump. He's kind of what Cam Scott should have been. He's bigger and stronger than Cam, but that kind of 6'5" guy that can nail shots. He does play really good defense. I think it's a baller. I do, and he's gotten better and better each year, and really started to come on. Players do get better in basketball. It's not as much of a player development sport as football, but the more I look into it, the more I like the pickup. And I love Eagles staff, of course. Very excited about Michi, and I think that Asandiko from Providence is going to need some work physically, but he's a big guy that can pass and shoot. So, I mean, you need that. Some people were talking whether or not he's replacing Nick Pringle in an upgrade. I don't think that you would look at those two players and go, oh, Asandiko is just so much better, better athlete, all that. I don't think you say that at all. What I do think is Asandiko can do more things for you. You're not going to put Nick Pringle out at the top of the key and have him make a bunch of passes. He's just a banger inside, an enforcer, so to speak. And he should have been better on offense this year. Should have scored more. Kind of disappeared in games. I don't really have a problem with how Nick Pringle played. He kind of is what he is. But when you think back to what worked, which was BJ Mack, with BJ Mack, he didn't even dunk the whole year. Yeah, you had a center that didn't dunk the whole year, and you won 26 games. And why? Because he was skilled. So they're doing in the transfer portal what I hoped they would do. Not just going for the shiny big athlete that, shoots 15 times a game and makes 5, on a good night. And yeah, he can run and jump and he's a wild guy, but he's going to a dunk's going to go off the rim, or he's going to brick a layup, or he's going to miss free throws at an inopportune time. Kobe Knox, back to him, comes from a basketball family. So the bust rate, or the chance he's not going to do everything to help the team win, it's very, very low. And like I said, his last game at South Florida, tough year, man. When your coach passes away, 15-9, 2 assists, played a bunch of minutes, averaged 28.6 minutes, and was a starter for the Bulls. So we'll see what happens with those guys, but I do like the pickup of Mr. Kobe Knox coming in. All right, so football. By the way, baseball this weekend. I want to remind everybody, the voices, Derek Scott and Brad Muller will be on Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show with JB today. Gamecock Smorgasbord with our man, the pride of Hampton County, Alex Jones, is shifting with us, with Phil and I, and he'll come on about 12:30 this afternoon, fresh off the football practice field. Also want to remind everyone about our sponsor here, Palmetto Golf and Belt. Go to palmettogolfing.com. They're running a sale. Get those belts, and they're high end. They're for a good price. My man there, Brandon, does a great job. Super freaky fast shipping. You know, you order a Jimmy John sub, it's like freaky fast. This is freaky fast. And, you know, unless you go on Amazon and get that guarantee, sometimes you order something, they don't tell you when it's coming. And it's like 4 weeks later. Kind of ran into that with Gamecock coffee, but that should be getting out there. And if you do want to support Garnet Trust and want some delicious gourmet coffee or popcorn, go to GamecockCoffee.com. All right, there's everything for the opener. 15 minutes in here on coffee football. All right, so FanDuel.com. We briefly touched on this on the show, but I want to dig in. FanDuel.com. All the sports books are releasing over-unders, and I like this. I'm okay with list season. I do list myself, the breakout list on the BigSpur.com is a thing. But you take it all, you consume it, you discuss, really for discussion purposes. It's like when you're taking a class and the professor, I don't want to say says something provocative because that leads us down a higher education criticism path that can take a number of different ways. So I'm not going to say provocative, but in certain classroom settings, even when you're training for a job, they discuss scenarios and you discuss it and you're like, well, this, and this. It's meant to stimulate your mind to discussion. I don't know if the writers are thinking that when they're writing it, but that's how I take it. And that's how I think everyone that's a fan that consumes college football all-season content should take it. It's meant to stimulate discussion. Don't get mad. Like I said in the episode the other day, don't get all fired up about expectations one way or the other. It is what it is, and there's a lot of changes. And we're going to talk about Kirby Smart on the show today and some of his comments. It's another old man yells at cloud thing, but I find myself agreeing with Kirby a lot lately. I agree with Shane Beamer too, by the way. They have different styles, but we'll talk about his comments about NIL and the portal and agents and all that on the show. But the online sports books to me are interesting because, they're not always right. And an over-under is meant to kind of entice people to make money on both sides. But it does give you an idea of the folks that, their job is to be accurate with this stuff. And sometimes those folks have access to information that maybe the media at large does not, even the insiders. So that's why when you looked at a couple of years ago, Kentucky, South Carolina, I'm driving to Lexington, 2022. The line was Kentucky minus 11.5. Kentucky was ranked 13th in the country for that game. So that actually counted as a top 15 road win for Shane Beamer. And then all of a sudden you're looking at it and the line just drops to 3.5. I'm driving, and I think in between Indianapolis and Louisville, it went from 6.5, 3.5. Why? Will Levis wasn't going to play. How'd they know that? They have their ways. I think that, in certain situations, that information, getting information for them probably is not as difficult because they're not reporting anything, number one. And then number two, I think if you're a source or whatever at a college football program and, there's people that just need intel and they're not sitting there talking to your players and all the stuff that can come with gambling these days. I think maybe you just take care of those guys and you kind of come to an agreement, but I don't know who they talk to. I've never dug into that part of it, but I just know they find out stuff. And they don't mess around with crunching numbers and analytics and players and getting in. I mean, they're good. So FanDuel, we had a bet.ag that came out, and I'm convinced because I'm on that email chain from them. They have some good props that they send me. So I like it, but they sent out SEC over-unders. Carolina was at 5.5. I'm convinced, looking at the other schools, because it was very similar to last season, that they just copy and pasted last season. It was a clerical error. Maybe not, though. Maybe they know something we don't. That's an offshore book, though. This is FanDuel. And the good folks at FanDuel, I believe, kind of looked at how the SEC shook out last year and said, all right, it's a lot more evenly matched than maybe we anticipated. And so, there are in the 7.5 to 9.5 win range. This is over under. So they're not saying, oh, Carol, they're saying that, either or, right? It's a median kind of deal. So the 7.5 win range, there's four teams: Carolina, Auburn, A&M, and Missouri. Some think A&M's lower this year. Brad Crawford picked them to go 6-6. In tier two, 8.5, LSU and Ole Miss. Tier one, 9.5, Bama, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia. I finally figured out the Tennessee thing, that the schedule for the Vols sets up pretty sweet this year with the home and away. And then they have it's weird because they have Georgia early the weekend they normally play Florida, and then they have Florida late in November. That's interesting. Of course, the games move around a lot in the SEC now, but Florida down there late. Gosh, it's the latest it's been since 2001 after 9/11 when they shocked Spurrier. One of Spurrier's best teams, his last team down there, 34-32. I think Travis Stevens rushed for about 200 and something yards. And then, as an aside, what's pretty interesting, that's why Steve Spurrier is a pretty good coach. Sometimes his gut feelings were great. '05, he faces Florida, and just about every time they played Florida and would beat them, he would just line up and run the ball on them. So I was like, well, shoot, we couldn't stop the run then. We're not going to stop. They're not stopping the run. And that wasn't a great running team in '05. That was Sidney Rice and all that. But I think Dacus Turman had a big day that day. Mike Davis the first as a true freshman had a big day that day in '05 when they beat Urban Meyer's first team and the Gators 30-22. The defense got some turnovers. Big, but yeah, I think they threw the ball 17 times. Blake Mitchell was 7 for 17 in that game. Steve Spurrier, man. Whoa. Anyways, this is the latest. The Vols have gone down there, but you look at kind of how it sets up. Kirby Smart, speaking of him, he's talking about having a young team next year. You got to go to Knoxville, and they're hungry for a win over Georgia. That's an early one, and they do have some players back. Nico's back, and I think when I look at Tennessee, their season's going to rest on being good on defense again, despite their losses. They've recruited well, and then how does Nico progress? Can he go out and run that offense? But their schedule is a lot. It wasn't great last year, and it's very favorable this year. And you know what? For Tennessee fans, I'm not going to say anything about it. I did think maybe there was a conversation to be had. A 10-2 team that got to play Mississippi State versus a 9-3 team that had to play Ole Miss and LSU and A&M. I mean, maybe there's a conversation there. It's not just a lock. We didn't really talk about it before the playoff even. But look, that's Tennessee during the Saban era, being in the SEC East and kind of going through the wilderness a bit, had to play Alabama every single year. And so when their West rotating opponent was like LSU, that's 2 losses, right? Not to mention they weren't very, they weren't that good, you know. But what could have helped a lot of those coaches there get to a bowl, whatever, that was kind of tough because when you're looking at who you're going to beat, they usually beat Kentucky. They struggle with Andy during that period, but they should win those 2. I think they believe they should beat Carolina during that period. They probably that series obviously went back and forth. That's tough. So the Vols drew the rotten apple with that. So I kind of like to see things work out. So I'm not sad, but they're at 9.5. Texas 9.5. The other tiers 6.5 for Oklahoma, Florida, 5.5 for Arkansas. The pig stands alone. They're the only one over under at 5.5. 4.5 is Kentucky Vandy, 3.5 Mississippi State. So let's go through it. So South Carolina 7.5. That's on the high end. Most of the time it's around 6.5. There's been some good teams. I think last year was 5.5, 4.5. The Gamecocks won 8 in the regular season. 9 in the regular season. And the Gamecocks historically with a few exceptions. They usually are over on this. I think 2023, they obviously, I don't think they went over, but I think they were only like six. So yeah, they won five. And then one of the Muschamp years, 19, they didn't go over. And I'm not sure they did in 20 either, but maybe that was 1.5. I'm not sure what those odds were during that weird pandemic year, but they usually go over 2021, 2022, 2024 under Shane Beamer. So they're right there at 7.5. So what's the path to going over? Because if they win seven and they look, man, they they may not have injuries and go win seven. I mean, you don't know. I mean, like a question I have: what by the time they play Alabama at home, what's everything going to be like? Is the Tide going to be top team in the country? Are they going to be mad? Um, the spreads and things like that will be determined as the season goes along. What's that? What's the deal with the Missouri game? There's all these questions. So I'm just gonna be honest. The Gamecocks could be 7-5, and it wouldn't be a reason for alarm. I was watching an interview with John Talty, my friend from CBS and 24/7 Sports, and he said he came down and visited with Beamer and the staff, and he said that they're confident about this coming season, but they don't feel pressure of playoff or bust, and I don't think that's the case. I think that they feel like they're recruiting well, long term. The program's healthy. It's heading in the right direction. Results in 1 year don't define you, although expectations are pretty high. But it's not playoff or bust. Just forget that. I mean, that's I'll shoot. I think they can make the playoff, but I also think they can win 7 games. So anyway, let's go through the schedule. What's the path to going over? Okay, and so when you look at it, there's kind of different categories for games. There's a lot of toss-ups that could go either way, and those are the ones that typically define your season. I think going into last season, uh, at the beginning, Kentucky would just about everybody would be at least a toss-up, and then there'd be games you're underdogs. I thought LSU, looking at it before last season, I thought that was definitely at the very least a toss-up. Ole Miss underdog, Alabama on the road underdog. I even said Oklahoma on the road toss up. I think most people said underdog. A&M, I said toss up. Missouri was I think underdog for me going into last year just because they hadn't beaten them, and by God, they almost didn't. I watched a highlight of the Luther Burden catch. I was there and had to drive back 13 hours the next day. Brought my stepson. We had a fantastic day. And he caught that pass with a minute to go, and I sat there in stunned silence. I didn't even. I just buried my head in my hands after Rocket caught the shovel pass and went in the end zone. Whew, that was about to be a long drive back, and it was anyway. But anyway, Clemson, I think heading into the season being up there would have been an underdog situation. So, and these things change. I think by the time A&M got there, they were undefeated in the league. So I don't know that you would call the Gamecocks a favorite. The spread was, I think, A&M -3 or something. By the time Missouri got there, you would call the Gamecocks a favorite because they hadn't done much on the road and Gamecocks were hot. Clemson ended up being a line favorite, but a lot of people said the wrong team was favored. Alabama, I think, was a 3-touchdown favorite. Kentucky was about a 9-point favorite, I believe, in that game. So these things change, but hey, for poops and giggles, let's just roll it out. Virginia Tech in Atlanta in the opener. I'm going to call the Gamecocks. I think this is a favorite game. I think being an opener, they have 2 new coordinators. It's going to be interesting, to see kind of what happens. Gamecocks have new faces all over the field. This is a dangerous game. The Hokies are not as good as they used to be. Let's just be honest. I mean, and that team last year had higher expectations. There are people talking about them going to the playoff, and they went 6-7. But anytime you have new coordinators and you're facing a team and bringing a lot of new guys, not and younger guys in. It's a big, huge, hyped neutral site game. Gamecocks are going to have a lot of fans in Atlanta. You got a national TV window. You have to be very, very careful. Virginia Tech had some very unfortunate for them personnel losses last year. They do have their quarterback back, but I'm going to say the Gamecocks should be a favorite in that game. Not heavy. I'll take a 3-point win right now because you can, as we found out last year, you can build on an opener that's closer than expected and go on to have a good season. We've seen it around here. 2012 team may be in the best team Spurrier had, and they played a good Vanderbilt team that ended up, I think, winning 8 or 9 games that season in Nashville to open, but they almost lost 17-13. 4 weeks later, they're beating Georgia's butt 35-7 at home and ranked in the top 5. So, but a loss in the opener can seriously derail you. I think, frankly, the North Carolina loss in 2023 set a bad tone. I definitely think it did in 19. So win at all cost, man. Yeah, just win. Like Al Davis, just win, baby. So Gamecocks are favorite there. SC State heavy favorite. I think that's the case. No disrespect to them. Vanderbilt, I want to go toss up because it's a dangerous game, especially if you start 2-0. It's the SEC home opener. Everybody's going to be pumped. Hopefully it's at night. But, man, Diego Pavia, he's not going to be scared coming in. And they remember last year, and they remember they haven't beaten Carolina in forever. And it will happen again one day. Everybody's got to take that L to Vanderbilt eventually. Even Alabama had to do it last year. It's just, just hold on for one more year, man. I get nervous about this game every year, especially, I mean, you guys know the kill zone. I'm impressed with the job they did. They finished with pretty well last season too. Beat Georgia Tech pretty badly in the Birmingham Bowl, 35-13. As we all know, though, you can lose the Birmingham Bowl and come back and have an excellent season. So don't fret if you're Georgia Tech. Now, this game, as scary as Vanderbilt is even scarier. At Missouri, Gamecocks have not won out there since 17. That was earlier. It was an early-ish game in the season, 31-13. Got off to a tough start, but Josh Heupel was the offensive coordinator for Missouri at the time. But Deebo Samuel had a big kick return. The Gamecocks got a turnover, and Jam Williams picked off a pass, and Garnet Thor, Hayden Hurst. That was the first time we saw the reverse, and he got in the end zone. Jake Bentley had a good game. Defense shut them down, and they won pretty easily. I mean, Carolina's won out there before, but not in a long time. The 19 game made me cry. Not cry. I was at a wedding, but that game sucked. Mike Morgan called that game. The 100-yard pick six. 2021 was the most frustrating game I've seen in the Beamer era. Carolina should have beaten that team 31-28. Couldn't stop the run. And then the offensive game plan 1 week after you have a brilliant outing against Florida. We all know what happened. Don't need to get into that. And then in 2023, there was really no chance. Missouri was rolling. Carolina had a patchwork offensive line. And then Big Tree got hurt during the game, and it was just Spencer was running for his life that day. Tyshawn Russell dropped a walk-in touchdown, 34-12, Mizzou. But this one's going to be big. I mean, you kind of look at Missouri. They're probably going to get off to a good start. They have a lot of home games at the beginning of the season. Look out. This one will be the first big test. So I'm gonna call that a toss up, just to be nice. Gamecocks come back home against Kentucky. I feel the same way about them as I feel about Virginia Tech. Mark Stoops didn't forget how to coach, but the question there is personnel. And that's one of Vandy and Kentucky are both at 4.5 over under. Those are the only two opponents in the SEC that the Gamecocks have that are below the 6-win mark for over under. After that, there's an open date. And then it's calling Baton Rouge at LSU. South Carolina has not won at LSU since '94. That was the first time they went down there as a member of the SEC on a rainy night. They got a win. Steve Tannehill, Brad Scott, first bowl winning team in program history. And since then, it's been really, really tough. Not very many close games, even. Closest one, of course, was the heartbreaker in 2012. Carolina's ranked third, LSU ninth. Les Miles says this is where dreams go to die. That was a loaded LSU team. My God. Go go look at the 2012 LSU Tigers depth chart. See the number of players in the NFL they had on offense. And they didn't have a great offense. They actually just lined up and ran the ball at Carolina and were successful doing it, like Les Miles normally did. But that's where dreams go to die. A lot of people are calling, not only calling Baton Rouge, calling back to 2012. And the Gamecocks could be 5-0 heading to Baton Rouge. I think they were 6-0 when they went last time, and ranked in the top 10. With LSU, I love Garrett Nussmeier. I think he's a great player. I think there'll be, they got some help on defense from the portal. Their defense is going to be better. It's going to be a tough game. I'm going to say underdog right now. A lot depends on their portal class. They open at Clemson. That's going to, again, it's an opener, so I don't know what it'll completely tell us. But if LSU goes into that Death Valley and wins an opener for the first time in 5 years, they're going to be rolling, and they're going to be highly ranked. Come back home, play the Oklahoma Sooners. A lot of folks think this is a toss-up. I'm going to say slight favorite for the Gamecocks there. I want to see it to believe it, that their offensive line's fixed, that Mateer is going to be this savior, Arbuckle, the OC. A lot of respect for those guys. I mean, thought the world of them at Washington State, but you still have to be able to protect. It's a line of scrimmage league. Sometimes when you kind of look at it and say, oh, it's all the coordinator and will be better, it's not always all the coordinator. Now, sometimes it is. I mean, I remember, think about the 2017 versus 2018 offense at Carolina. That was the coordinator. Look back on it in 17, that team couldn't score a lick at times, but had NFL players all over the field. So sometimes, Billy Napier to Chad Morris at Clemson, big difference, 2010, 2011. Huge, because Morris went out there and attacked. It wasn't statistically, a big improvement, but certainly the offense ran more smooth under Dowell Loggins here than the previous guy. So sometimes it is. Seth Luttrell, who they replaced, he's called plays at a lot of different places. Never had an issue. So I'm going to say Oklahoma needs to fix their offensive line. We'll know by the time they come to Columbia how tough it is. But man, that's still with the Gamecocks' luck, they'll be really, really good and coming over wanting revenge. But they're at 6.5, so they come in there. But I'm going to say favorite for the Gamecocks in that one. Alabama, right now I'm going to go toss up. Could be Bama. Gamecocks are underdogs. Could be Gamecocks are favorites. Alabama does return a ton of talent, and I do think Kalen DeBoer can coach, despite what Bama fans say. It's going to be interesting to follow them this year because, I was thinking the other day, I don't know that they'll fire Kalen DeBoer after 2 years necessarily. But depending on if there's a big West Coast job open, keep in mind, a lot of us remember before Saban at Alabama. Some of us don't, the younger crowd. I mean, it was 17 years. They were the best. And they were the best almost right away. I mean, second year, boom, they were in the hunt. Third year, they won it all. And then boom, 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 boom. Number one recruiting class over and over. I mean, it was, I don't think we're going to see anything like that in the next era. I think a lot of people are missing that. They're searching for the next Alabama, but there's not going to be a next Alabama. If you look at when Alabama has not been dominant the last, under Saban, before Saban, the sport was largely full of these mini dynasties that would pop up. I mean, the Blue Bloods were always pretty good, but you would have like a Southern Cal run under Pete Carroll, lasted 2 or 3 years. If you take Alabama out of it in recent times, Clemson had a very good run. they would have been that mini dynasty had Bama not been there. Georgia, 2020, 3 years, pretty good. And then they come back to the pack and somebody else comes up. Your Ohio States of the world are always usually pretty good. Notre Dame's always kind of right there. But you didn't see a 17-year dynasty, but you did under Saban. So that's not coming back. But I will remind everyone, again, ignoring the Saban era and looking at Alabama post Bear Bryant, two coaches have just walked away and taken other jobs. Bill Curry left to go to Kentucky. And then Dennis Francione left and went to Texas A&M in a reverse Bear Bryant. Mike Price didn't even make it to coach a first game. So there's a special kind of pressure there that they haven't experienced at Bama in a long time. And those fans haven't had a lot to complain about. And they're just like every other SEC fan base. So I'm very intrigued by them. Tide is sitting at over under 9.5. They open at Florida State. Florida State's just had to redo their whole deal, but they got Tide killer Gus Malzahn as their OC. Their stadium's finished, and they're going to have an actual crowd, not look like the Cleveland Indians when they used to play at the municipal stadium. That was just a weird year down there. So I'm going to say Alabama toss-up right now for the Gamecocks. At Ole Miss, I'm going to throw toss-up in there just because I don't know that Ole Miss, not that they missed their window, because there'll be another group of good portal players and stuff like that come along. And look at their schedule. They may actually be better. They may not stub their toe. Lane Kiffin's a good coach, and it's down there. Going down there is not like going to Baton Rouge or College Station. So I'm going to go toss up there. And at some point, Carolina's got to beat Lane Kiffin, right? A team coached by Kiffin. They've won at Ole Miss before. Will Muschamp's last game, 2020, was down there. And Carolina had a 42-38 lead. They just couldn't stop anybody. Lost 59-42. Amazingly, Will Muschamp's first game at Carolina was 13-10 at Vandy. His last game was 59-42. I don't know that we all expected that. So I'm going to say toss up there. At Texas A&M, I'm going to say underdog because it's Kyle Field. The Gamecocks have never won there. It's late in the season. Even if A&M is so-so, that's tough. You got to go out there. There is an open date between Ole Miss and A&M. But, man, at LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, at Ole Miss. 4 straight weeks. That's the gauntlet that we thought the gauntlet was last year. This is a 4-game gauntlet. Unbelievable. Coastal Carolina favorite. Clemson, I'll say toss up as of right now. Certainly the Tigers have had a lot of success in Columbia. So 2 games you're an underdog in. Missouri and Ole Miss definitely could be underdog games. So somewhere between 2 and 4. And so the path is going to be winning the toss-up games as normal. The hinge of the season, so to speak, assuming they can get out of the first 5 at least 4-1. Well, actually, I'm just kidding. The hinge of the season is going to be this stretch at Missouri, Kentucky, open date at LSU, Oklahoma, Bama, at Ole Miss, open date A&M. Right there from game 4 till the A&M game. And that is a span of, so there's 3 to start with, 2 at the end. So that's a span of 6 games. Is that 6? I think so. 3 and then 2, well, 7 games. So that's 7 games. That's going to determine the season. And they're not all toss-ups in my opinion, but every team there is capable of beating South Carolina. But the good news is South Carolina is capable of beating every team. That's going to be how the SEC goes, which is why I was so mad about the playoff selection. I think there's a void of reality opinion about the reality of this league. Right. Don't want to say that anymore. All right. Don't forget, Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show, the voices, Derek Scott and Brad Muller live from Tampa to preview the women's Final Four. Dawn Staley and her team are chasing it. Also, we have Alex Jones, straight off the football practice field. They get 6 periods to watch today instead of 3. So that's good. We'll see what Alex can tell us about Shane Beamer's team. And I'll be back tomorrow with more coffee. Don't forget also today, JC and Morgan college football podcast show. If you're listening to the morning show, we're going to start JC and Morgan at 9:45. Of course, that overlaps. But you can always go back and catch it on the YouTube channel, College Football Forever Chief, or right here on Chief Sports South Carolina. We're going to kind of we started another channel for all the like broad-based college football stuff. We got JC Morgan going to have another SEC focused podcast, just non-Gamecock, non-South Carolina kind of stuff, or South Carolina plus. How about that? Everything's plus, right? But be sure to check us out there, and then it's also going to be a podcast form within 24 hours. With JC and Morgan specifically, it renders slow for some reason, so we don't get the audio sometimes for a day. And then we put that up, of course, on the JC and Morgan podcast, Spotify, all that good stuff. All right, folks, have a wonderful, wonderful Thursday. This is JC Shurburtt signing off. It's been coffee.